This recording studio should.
I know, that's what I'm looking for, because he'd probably be the one that could help me, but.
Yeah, they're right. Let me see if
I
they're.
just looked, he wasn't there a second ago. Back in a second, they checked ours like multiple times yesterday, because it looks like everything's on, so you just can't
Right.
hear it. It's like, well, I'm not even getting the microphone boost, like it's not even showing up at all, that's live. First I did, that's why I thought I was in the right, plugged in the right spot, because I had a real big microphone boost. Let me go walk down there and see if someone's there. Let's go see that.
This box here. Bring it back to
Unless he turned it off and he walked away.
no.
So press have and credential, and you can, sir, you're press, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And, if you see, we'll use you as an example for this
Sure.
stuff.
Hi.
I am Annie.
How's it going? Chuck, Dan.
And proof show them your credential, so it's tap, or press dot, just like that. Hey, how are ya? Good morning.
This is the Appropriations Committee meeting room? Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is the usual room, but.
No, yeah, alright, so this is a Homeland Security hearing.
A little bit different of a setup, but
So this is a hearing.
Open to the public?
It is.
Oh, what do you mean different? What do you mean different?
other than like versus like the other hearing rooms.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So it feels a little, just feels different than the other hearing
More
rooms.
intimate.
Yeah, we're doing.
So you guys expecting a big enough, I'm pressed, but if there's not gonna be a huge crowd, I might sneak up a little bit from the back row.
Yes,
Cool, thanks.
definitely.
Oh, yeah, that was just to, you put yourself wherever you need to,
Cool.
other than where the testifying
Yeah,
members
yeah,
are.
Yeah, I think you're safe.
Good morning. So I got word this morning it's supposed to report on today.
Okay, well, congratulations and thank you. Damn you.
As
That's good.
Peter said, just do 365
Yeah.
and then you check the box.
Yeah,
So if I don't like it, then I can correct. But if I do, then, you know, I made a good choice.
so what will your title be?
Deputy Budget Director. So I would just say Jeff Kane.
Yeah, okay. Well, and that's great.
So,
You know, sorry that you're leaving, but I'm glad that you leave those folks in shape.
I think the idea is that I'll be very internally focused. I don't know how much
I
interaction
plugged in
there
right
is.
now, that was fine. At first when I plugged in and
You think so?
tapped, I had a big.
Because we're gonna call it.
Alan's kind of thinking,
This
that's kind of his
No,
his
no,
strategy.
that- Yeah, yeah.
No, usually we
Although I
have
kind of want to talk to him
have
about
another
it.
one.
You're burning yourself out trying to manage every single student.
Yes.
I couldn't find it.
And not just that, I mean, I think
Like
where you
with
can
this
really
end
provide
here?
value to him is
Usually there's a
when
standard thing,
things
but
come
I couldn't
back
find one of those here.
from the components,
So but we can't use
or
that.
things
I
coming
haven't used
to
that
us from
before.
the
Like it's
components,
something like that
or
maybe.
back to us.
And at first I had a big
best,
mic boost.
and that they don't pass muster, you're gonna be able to spot it.
Yeah,
before
It's
you-
cold in
so you
here.
don't have to,
hopefully.
Did
Always, we always
you
get things
figure out why
after
I-
they do.
yeah.
So I can
I
tell
changed
myself,
the
yeah,
Michelle
see my mic
Mordeza
boost.
meeting.
I haven't had a chance to read those emails yet, but,
And I
We're gonna
tried
do
it
the
a bunch
quiz
of
group
different
thing
ways.
today.
Started my
oh,
phone.
okay.
You can too. Do it.
Well, we'll see if I, we'll see if I have done,
It'll be a fun day.
looked at all the state reminders.
No, no, no.
Oh,
She'll show you
I just
where.
haven't had the chance to see it.
I feel like you.
And at first
It's
I
gonna
thought,
get better,
"Oh,
but
hello."
probably
Then
not
it
till
went off.
18
I
really
checked
starts.
again to check the other mic and it went off.
But you've looked at Chris's stuff, haven't you? And my
Yeah, he
stuff.
sent
So
my
you
stuff
really only
back.
have. I mean, I know that's a
Oh,
lot.
this
Did
is
Chris,
true.
has
Title
Chris
I.
sent you this yet?
There's not another place.
Has Chris?
Sent you his part of the statement?
Yes, and
Okay.
that's what I need to work on today, and the Title I stuff.
But
So
The
maybe, I
Title
don't know.
I stuff is,
I know.
I mean,
I feel, it feels bigger than it is because I keep wanting to.
what are you
sit
gonna do
down
on
and
Monday then? Tuesday if you do that on Monday.
I don't.
Hello, morning.
Hi, good morning.
If you're in there,
Good
Well, I
morning.
mean, I won. As long as,
those are in place.
so it doesn't matter which
We're
one it
looking for
is.
another.
No, it's just we have 6 members that are going to speak to us.
This is a 10:30.
No,
10:30?
let's hope not.
Yeah, everybody,
Hope
every
not.
subcommittee's doing
I did not eat enough food for it to be long.
it.
At this rate, I'm gonna have to go get a sweater.
Public
To go with my
Yeah.
sweater.
hearing days, like on Mr. Price, maybe.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
I'd rather wear these ones.
Some Doug, another engineer. Big engineers that take it.
Yeah, the 10 months, I'll be, yeah, you know,
Come on, John.
I think we're fine. Unless Mrs. Lowry, I don't think Mrs. Lowry's gonna sit up. You can either sit here or there.
Start?
I use my iPhone to time usually.
I know.
Because I don't know how to use this.
Is this thing turned on? It's great. Chairman's never used it before.
Mr. Gosar didn't submit his test. You know, I don't know because I went to bed and she's always up and out the door before I get up, so I just talked to her.
I know.
You're just lightly touching to get a feel for how that keypad feels.
One, two, 1, 2, test 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, test 1, 2.
So we can tell these people to.
Wrap it up.
Annie, do you know how to work that?
The timer.
I think they're gonna use my phone.
That's what
I'm
I
like-
said. The only difference is that you
Not
don't
only
have
do I not know how to use this, Carter sure as heck does
Yeah,
not.
no. We're gonna be using my
I'm
phone.
like, the little lights there are on, but I don't.
Hi, sir.
Yeah, iPhone.
C-SPAN is covering this?
Yeah, right? Mr. Chairman, I'll be sitting with you this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Annie's hearing.
Why would the world do that?
Good morning, good to see you, folks.
Hey, why would they do that?
All right, anytime I'm with Dr. Harris, I'm dead, dear. Judge, good morning, sir.
Good morning, I'm glad y'all are here.
Yes, sir.
Sir, here's your binder.
Good morning,
And
good
then
to see
your
you.
opening
Pleasure.
statement.
Yep, good to see you.
And then everyone's testimony in order, if you want to, what's really going to be helpful. You got the pictures of everyone testifying in order. We only got 6 and
Hello, Andy.
we're off. Good morning.
I think we got pretty much, Lucille, you ready to go?
Oh, sure.
What? You don't need to. I'm making a short statement. We're gonna call this, listening session to order. I want to welcome everybody to the Homeland Security Subcommittee on Appropriations. This is our first hearing of the year. It's been a long time since this subcommittee hosted members' hearing day. Our new full committee chairman, Mr. Freelandhausen, has stressed to us the importance of providing a forum where members can share their ideas and express their concerns about the spending and appropriations bills. I completely agree with this. Therefore, I look forward to personally and officially receiving your thoughts on appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security and how they impact your district and our nation. It is my plan to take your ideas and expertise to build a collective knowledge base that ensures the security of the American people in a fiscally responsible manner. With that, I'd like to recognize Ms. Roble Allard, our distinguished ranking member, for any remarks she may wish to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to this morning's hearing. This year is likely to be a very difficult year for this subcommittee, and we are very much excited about the fact that you are willing to come here to give us some input as we go about our work. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing your testimony.
And we have a schedule, and we're trying to stick to it. So, Congressman Barr, you are now recognized for giving us any information you wish to share.
Thank you, Chairman Carter and Ranking Member Roybal Allard, and to the Chairman of the full committee. We appreciate the invitation to come here and offer our testimony and provide some input on the priorities of the Homeland Security Subcommittee. Obviously, our work here today is to urge this body to adequately fund our priorities and priorities that I think should be reflected in the subcommittee's appropriations bill would include the Assistance to Firefighters Grant and the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response Grants. As you know, the SAFER grants provide much-needed funding to fire departments across the United States to hire and retain career and volunteer firefighters, as well as to enhance fire departments' ability to protect the health and safety of its firefighters and the people in local communities in which it serves. The fire grants provide critical funding to local fire and emergency medical services departments to purchase crucial equipment used to help aid first responders to do their jobs in the selfless service of their work. For example, because of the Assistance to Firefighters Grant, Red Lick Volunteer Fire Department, located in the 6th District of Kentucky, which I represent, was able to fill in some gaps in their small budget and purchase new personal protective equipment used to enhance the safety and health of its firefighters. And there's other examples of these grants assisting local fire departments within my district and EMS departments as well. I would also like to ask this subcommittee to do everything that it can to ensure that the Chemical Stockpile Emergency Preparedness Program, or CSEP, is fully funded at the highest amount possible. As you may know, in the 6th District of Kentucky, we are home to one of the 2 remaining sites for demilitarization under the Chemical Weapons Convention Arms Control Treaty at the Bluegrass Army Depot in Richmond, Kentucky. BGAD, as we call it, currently guards a stockpile of chemical agents comprising of approximately 523 tons of nerve agent GB sarin and VX and mustard gas. If a fire or an atmospheric release were to occur at BGAD, it would threaten public health and safety and the environment. An immediate depot workforce of over 1,500 and a population of well over 600,000 Kentuckians in the surrounding communities would be at risk in an emergency. The CSEP program provides vital funds to state and local governments to enhance emergency response management for our constituents in the event of an accident or fire at BGAD. Funding for this program, as well as the fire and SAFER grants, are appropriated by Congress to the Department of Homeland Security and are administered through FEMA. In order to continue to protect the health and safety of the American people and the people of the 6th District of Kentucky, I urge this committee to provide the highest funding possible to ensure our state and local emergency responders have the adequate personnel and equipment it needs to effectively respond to possible life-threatening emergencies. And once again, Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to weigh in and offer our priorities for your consideration.
Well, thank you, Mr. Barr. We appreciate you being here. Let me say, this is a listening session. However, there may be someone that wants to ask a question. Is there anyone on our table? We're going to listen more than talk, hopefully. We're not trying to dominate the conversation. Anybody have a question? Thank you for this. We
Thank
will
you.
take note, and we'll do our best to
Thank you, Chairman.
accommodate. Mr. Polis?
Thank you.
Mr. Polis, welcome. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you participating.
Thank you for having me before such a handsome and intelligent committee with a wonderful chair. I want to thank Chairman Carter, Ranking Member Lowy. I want to talk about some of the DHS portions of the budget that relate to immigration, a hot topic that obviously the President has talked about, and we hear a lot from constituents in our district. In recent years, we've allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to immigration enforcement. There's been a lot of discussion of how we should best target that money. Some of it, unfortunately, has been targeted after individuals with longstanding ties to our community rather than those who pose threats to our community, which should be the focus of the resources we have. The first program I wanted to discuss is 287G, which deputizes local law enforcement to engage in federal immigration enforcement. Instead of keeping serious criminals from threatening our communities, this program forces police to waste their time and resources in trying to figure out the immigration status of non-criminals and also opens them up to legal charges of racial profiling. The program is very unpopular with law enforcement. The Police Foundation, the Major Cities Chief Association have all found that 287G has actually made their communities less safe, gotten in the way of community policing, and created additional distrust between police and immigrant communities. I think we can, as we're looking for savings, which I know you are, we can save millions of dollars by cutting funding to 287G, a program that simply doesn't work and makes our communities less safe. The Secure Communities and Priority Enforcement Programs are another problematic partnership between immigration officials and local law enforcement. It is fundamentally the responsibility of the federal government to enforce our immigration laws, and when you try to pull in or coerce or force or even pay local law enforcement to do it, you're taking them away from doing what their job is, which is protecting our communities. So it's very important to keep that in mind as we establish our budget priorities. If an individual is identified as being in the United States illegally, ICE will submit a detainer request calling on local law enforcement to hold the detainee beyond the time they otherwise would have been released. And while ICE, again, maintains that it prioritizes the removal of criminal aliens, the records from DHS show that 26% of those deported through this program had no prior criminal convictions, and there's $347 million allocated for the Secure Communities Priority Enforcement Program, and I think that that's another excellent area that the committee can look at making cuts. I also proposed the inclusion of language in the criminal alien program that prohibits the DHS from using federal dollars to fund criminal alien program, or CAP, which gives ICE the authority to detain undocumented individuals in police custody. Again, the program has ballooned in recent years. It spiked from $6.6 million in 2004 to $322 million. That's just over a 10-year period. And we could save hundreds of millions of dollars by defunding that program and focusing our priorities on criminal aliens. I want to conclude with a proposal to cut funding for private detention facilities, very expensive. Currently, ICE holds 65% of detainees in private facilities, including one in Colorado I visited several times. These facilities are much more costly than the county prisons and other places where people are kept. In August, Secretary Jay Johnson ordered a review of this practice. Homeland Security Advisory Council adopted the stance that fiscal concerns and enforcement policies should not require our deference to the status quo. The body currently allocates $1.56 billion in funding for private detention facilities. We can, again, cut that program out entirely or make significant cuts to that line item. For too long, ICE has a blanket mandate to detain and deport, leading to programs that waste our taxpayer money, make our communities less safe. Some of these proposed cuts I brought before you today could save the country $2 billion, as well as help make our communities more safe. I thank you for the opportunity to testify. Be happy to answer any questions, and I look forward to working with each of you to save money on the DHS budget line.
Thank you, Mr. Polis, for your comments. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still learning about some of these programs, and maybe you could clarify for me, Mr. Polis. The 287G program, isn't that a voluntary program where agencies can participate but are not required?
Oh, absolutely, but it's federal dollars. And so given that its impact has not been positive, and many of the major metropolitan police areas don't cooperate because they see it as actually increasing crime, it would be pretty low-hanging fruit to cut. So I would encourage the committee to take a look at eliminating or cutting that back.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Polis.
Thank you.
Mr. Gosar? Is he here?
All right, you'll go next.
Who's here? Mr. Snyder?
All right.
Mr. Dunn? We'll come back to those others. I think things are gonna move pretty fast, but welcome, Mr. Dunn.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be here. Chairman Carter, ranking members, and all members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding my support for the Offshore Patrol Cutter Program. As the committee is aware, the Coast Guard's acquisition program of record calls for 25 cutters, offshore patrol cutters, to replace the medium endurance cutters. The offshore patrol cutters will feature increased range and endurance, an improved communications and electronics suite, and the capability to accommodate safe launch and recovery of helicopters and small boats in all weather. In accordance with the Coast Guard's acquisition strategy, $530 million in funding is required in fiscal year 2018. The necessity for the substantial increase in the funding over the $100 million enacted in fiscal year 2017 is derived from the normally scheduled procurement of the first offshore patrol cutter and the purchase of the long lead time materials for the second ship. As the committee is aware, Eastern Shipbuilding Group is the shipbuilder under contract to produce the first tranche of offshore patrol cutters. I can personally assure you of the skill and care the hardworking employees of Eastern Shipbuilding will invest in delivering the offshore patrol cutters on time and on budget, because it is my personal honor to represent them in Congress. In fact, since 2002, in the highly competitive commercial marketplace, Eastern Shipbuilding has built and delivered 136 ships, all of which were on time and on budget. My constituents can fulfill their end of the bargain if Congress does its part to provide the necessary resources in a timely manner. For this reason, I respectfully request the appropriation of $530 million for the Offshore Patrol Cutter Program, which will allow undisrupted procurement of the first offshore patrol craft and preparations for the construction of the second ship. My constituents are eager to assist the Coast Guard with performance of its statutory missions and by delivering the next generation capabilities the offshore patrol cutter represents. I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you and advocate on their behalf and for your attention on this important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. We've worked very hard to get the offshore patrol cutter online, and the chair is very supportive of that project. Anybody else have a comment? We're also
Grateful very much for your time and your support. Thank you, sir.
Let's call again. Is Ms. Jackson Lee, is anyone from our office, or anyone here? Mr. Gosar? Mr. Schneider, we can get him in. Mr. Snyder? Well, we set a time for these people, and they may be sticking to the time. Okay? So, we're gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, and, the next schedule is at 9:50, which is 5 minutes away, so we'll just stand at ease and.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a letter?
Certainly.
Would like to present to the committee. Okay.
Well, like everything else, it's very up to us. We have two members that have. You're welcome to go ahead. We're waiting on the people who are ahead of you, but first come, first served.
I will borrow that.
So thank you for coming, and we're welcome, and we're here to listen.
Great, thank you. This is on. All right, good. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Ranking Member, and the distinguished colleagues of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to speak before the committee. I'm here today to request robust funding for the Department of Homeland Security, specifically two programs of particular importance to the residents of my district and our country. The United States has always been a nation of immigrants and a shining beacon of hope for those fleeing oppression and seeking a better life. We must ensure our country remains open and welcoming to refugees so the next generation of Americans seeking refuge from war, violence, and oppression may find home here. I strenuously oppose President Trump's discriminatory executive order to bar entry of all refugees, which I believe does nothing to target the root causes of terrorism, does not make our country safer, and undermines the very values that define our nation. The Department of Homeland Security's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, plays an important role by processing applications for those seeking entry into the United States as asylum seekers, refugees, or through other U.S. humanitarian programs. This service works alongside other important federal initiatives, including the Department of Health and Human Services Refugee and Entrant Assistance Account, REA, the Department of State's Migration and Refugee Assistance, MRA, and Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance Accounts, ERMA, and the U.S. Agency for International Development's USAID International Disaster Assistance, IDA account. And I think that's the end of my initials for a while, to help refugees domestically and overseas. Under USCIS, currently USCIS faces lengthy backlogs and delays when processing applications. Media outlets reported that in June 2016, the backlog reached a record-breaking total of more than 495,000 cases. The United States must have the necessary resources to process the number of people seeking refugee or asylum status in our country. I urge this committee to work with USCIS to determine whether additional funding could reduce this backlog and both expedite and increase the accuracy of our application and screening processes. While no system is perfect, the United States has a vigorous vetting process for potential entrants. I am committed to working to improve our screening procedures. However, I strongly disagree with the need to pause processing and admittance of refugees while we do so. I also urge the committee to continue to fund the Urban Area Security Initiative, UASI, nonprofit security grant program within the Department of Homeland Security. The NSGP was created so at-risk nonprofit organizations that serve as community centers have the resources needed to protect themselves against the potential extremist threats. The funds may be used for important capital improvements to upgrade security measures. Examples include installing fencing, bollards, lighting, video surveillance, metal detectors, access controls, improvements to blast-proof windows and doors, and cybersecurity enhancements. Underscoring the need for this program is the troubling nationwide rise of anti-Semitic incidents in 2017, including dozens of bomb threats against Jewish community centers and the severe vandalism of 2 cemeteries in communities. In total, there have been more than 100 threats against Jewish organizations in 81 sites in 33 states since just the beginning of this year. This threat is exacerbated by the efforts of ISIL and the extremist organizations to inspire and motivate homegrown violent extremism in the United States. The NSGP allows important community centers to take the necessary steps to both deter and protect themselves from hate-motivated violence. Together, the USCIS and the NSGP represent the United States' dual commitment to remaining a welcome refuge for those fleeing violence and a secure home for all of our diverse communities. I urge the committee to prioritize funding for these two critical programs in fiscal year 2018, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your input. All right, Mr. Gosar, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee. I'm Congressman Paul Gosar, and I represent Arizona's 4th Congressional District. I'm also the chairman for the Congressional Western Caucus, chairman of the House Committee on Natural Resources Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources, and vice chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reforms Subcommittee of Interior. There are a number of critical programs that we'd like to address in the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. The first important measure I would like to advocate for today is the defunding of sanctuary cities and jurisdictions. The Center for Immigration Studies has reported that there are more than 276 sanctuary jurisdictions nationwide. These cities and localities have refused to comply with federal immigration laws and have released more than 8,000 criminal alien offenders over 8 months. In the same amount of time, nearly 1 out of every 4 released criminals have been arrested for subsequent offenses. The House has voted and passed language that prohibits federal funding from going to sanctuary cities 5 different times in recent years. Last year, 42 members of the House co-signed a similar request to this subcommittee. I respectfully request the inclusion of this potentially life-saving provision in this fiscal year's bill. The next measure I would like to advocate deals with the preventing of funds for the implementation of former President Obama's illegal executive actions on immigration. In his first 6 months in office, President Obama stated no less than 22 times that he did not have the authority to unilaterally change immigration policy. Yet that is exactly what he attempted to do by issuing an unconstitutional executive action November 2014 with the intent of creating the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, DAPA program, and expanding the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or the DACA program. The Obama administration's executive actions clearly infringe on the authority of Congress to control immigration matters, as well as the power of the purse and the Anti-Deficiency Act. In 2015, the House passed House Amendment 6 to the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act to defund DACA and DAPA. Inserting this rider into the FY18 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill will provide assurances to the public that we will do all we can to end this lawlessness, to defend our Constitution, and uphold our oath to office in submitting this appropriations language request. I ask that the subcommittee uphold the rule of law by including this important language in this year's fiscal bill. The American people have made it abundantly clear that they wish to see our southern border fortified. For decades, a porous border has allowed millions of unlawful immigrants to enter our country. The Secure Fence Act of 2006, which is signed into law by President George W. Bush, required the Secretary of Homeland Security to achieve and maintain operation control over the entire international land and maritime borders of the United States, and called for 2 layers of reinforced fencing in parts of California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, totaling more than 700 miles. This fencing was intended to deter crossings where illegal activity is at high risk, but DHS has yet to complete the law's fencing requirements. Security fences work, and completion of the double-layer fence on our border with Mexico should be a top priority. Last year, 21 members of the House joined me in submitting an appropriation language request on this very matter. I believe this should take priority and respectfully ask for inclusion of these resources in this year's fiscal bill. The fiscal year 2017 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill provided $5.9 billion for ICE. I strongly support funding for State Criminal Alien Assistance Program, or the SCAP program. I applaud the subcommittee for prioritizing significant resources for this program last fiscal year, and would again like to ask this body to ensure sufficient funding for SCAP in this fiscal year's bill. Additionally, I'd like to see the amendment offered by Mr. Adderholt of Alabama, which prohibited federal funding for ICE to provide abortions, and the amendment offered by Mr. Culberson of Texas, which required ICE to detain Priority 1 and Priority 2 illegal aliens, both of which were adopted by the subcommittee and included in the base text of the fiscal year's bill last year. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you. I would like to thank all the members of the subcommittee for your important work and look forward to working with you in this year's fiscal bill. I thank the chairman, and I yield back.
Comments or questions? For your information, I am a big supporter of SCAP, I can tell you that.
It works.
Yep.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman.
gonna have to stand at ease until more person gets. Jackson Lee, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Thank you to the ranking member, and thank you for your patience in my coming from another meeting in the Capitol. Thank you very much. First, let me thank both Chairman Carter and Ranking Member Robel Allard. You all have worked together for a long time, and you have had great leadership on this committee. And as many of you know, I'm on the Homeland Security Authorizing Committee, a committee that I love, and frankly was on it at its origins in the heinous backdrop of 9/11. So the first thing I'd like to say is, through your leadership, the Homeland Security Department has been able to be a major buffer against any catastrophic terrorist act since 9/11. This does not discount San Bernardino, Orlando, and other incidences that we have had. We do not take that lightly, but it's been your work. So I'd like to speak very quickly to some without further explanation, but I'd like to emphasize some points that I would support. I think it is important to continue the $2 billion funding for the National Protection Programs Directorate. I'm on the Cybersecurity Committee, and I think if there's ever a new frontier or a continuing frontier for threats to the United States, it is cybersecurity. I am the former chair of the Transportation Security Committee, which at that time, subcommittee, which at that time included infrastructure, and I remember about a decade ago going to sewage and water plants as potential sites for terrorist activity. I still believe that our infrastructure that is now almost completely run by the cyber system will find itself vulnerable in counties and cities across America for any franchised or independent acts of terrorism. So I support cybersecurity efforts, protection of civilian federal networks, and to be supported at $900 million. And I think everyone knows the number that 85 to 90% maybe now, was 85% 10 years ago, of the cyber system or the private internet system is in the private sector. Priority should be given to telecommunication upgrades so that designated calls and communications can be placed on a more current technology during disasters and emergencies. I'm just going to throw in at this point, I still think that we are behind the curve. We've made great advancement on first responders being able to communicate to each other. You will find local jurisdictions where it's still difficult, or they still are not on the same system. Now, some might argue that it's a local issue, but it really is our issue, and so I'd like to at least have Homeland Security be that link to help our local entities. One of our subcommittees is emergency preparedness, and that communication is something that we hear all the time from the witnesses that come before us. The funding must address one of the most stubborn problems, failures of telecommunication systems in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. So that's the point that I think is very important. For some reason, systems go down. If you bring in people from out of state because it's such a massive disaster, how do they communicate with each other? I was thinking of a couple years ago, the massive fires in the West, and I think there was some question about being able to communicate on the same lines of this may be something that you've already focused on. Critical infrastructure and civilian government agencies must be prepared to identify and solve zero-day events which are previously under-detected software or firmware vulnerabilities that, if exploited, could have catastrophic results because there is no defense. My conclusion on that, because I have some other points on cybersecurity, is that we need to ramp up the cybersecurity component of Homeland Security, both in terms of the professional staffing and the creativity that would help us be. We should not be behind industry, we should be in front of industry. The castle and moat approach to cybersecurity must be replaced by a well-resourced and staffed agency that is prepared to meet the challenges posed by kinetic cyber threat environment that we would go ahead and see. I also think that one of the legislations that legislative efforts was to introduce training of more cybersecurity workforce and to have the Homeland Security be involved in that. I support $8 billion for the TSA to fully address additional requirements in screening processes, procedures, and training. This organization is very close to my heart, having served as a chair and a member of the committee for a number of years. I think that they get less credit. They are certainly intrusive. That is part of their job. But I would say that they, too, have been in the front lines in spite of many reports that I know that you've been in classified briefings about what was not detected. They should be noted for what has been detected and for stopping, again, any catastrophic or major incident that deals with what people carry on or are able to do on aircraft since 9/11. I support $8 billion for that. I'm very, I would want to emphasize to the committee the importance of professional training for TSOs. Their attrition rate, their level of staying power is rather difficult. They have young hires. They're hiring people at 19 years old. And so we have to find a way to keep them, maintain them, and train a professional staff. I think many of you know Vice Admiral Neffinger, who is not here, but he worked very hard with your resources, with your appropriations for the professional training process. And I really think we should emphasize that new TSOs and existing TSOs, new TSOs should go to the training site in Georgia and understand how important it is. New TSOs have no visible present understanding of 9/11. So that's something very important. But then the existing staff needs to be trained for professional development because they have to have the basis. I also think it's important for them to have a sense that they can do upward mobility and lateral between federal agencies to give them some incentive to continue to stay at the agency. They have the ability to transfer into some of the other law enforcement, other agencies. $400 million for transportation screening technology to improve those capabilities. $120 million to provide training for TSA frontline employees, including new basic training, I've said that, and $55 million for TSO retention, which is a real issue. I support $755 million for the Urban Area Security Initiative. This is to work with our USS grants to work with our high-risk terrorist attacks. That is a big debate about low risk and high risk. I'm in a city of a million plus, or a metroplex area of 3 million, Houston-Harris County area, and being on ground, on site on 9/11, I remember distinctly when there was massive confusion and rumors were flying beyond, Chairman, and Ranking Member, the rumors of the White House, the State Department. There were rumors of their next going to Houston because of the oil concentration. So we have to look at areas for what they might pose. $1.5 billion for national flood hazard mapping and risk analysis. Anyone knows the area that I come from, it is an ongoing challenge. of the whole flooding, and we had several catastrophic, or let me not use that term, we had several incidences of loss of life in flooding that we've had 2 years back to back in Houston. But it's an example of flooding. It's an example of the issues that happen in California in terms of potential flooding, and I think that is a very important part of what we do. $1.5 billion for commitment to maintain funding over the 5-year period dealing with this funding, which would amount to $7.5 billion in total. It's important to note that in the 1990s, the numbers of disasters nationally were about 30 a year. Today, they're over 100 at a cost of roughly $1 billion. I support robust funding for the pre-disaster mitigation program within FEMA, and there's a list of things that I think are important. My statement is on the record. I obviously support $100 million for the Port Security Grant Program. It has been very helpful to our ports across the nation. Maritime security is another element of crucial need, and even though ports represent a local economic engine, we should not in any way diminish the potential for threats. I've toured and visited a lot of ports. There's massive cargo, massive opportunity, and I would make the argument that the security is not as firm as we would like it. Port-wide maritime security, risk management, enhanced maritime domain awareness, supports maritime security training and exercises, and I think we should work with our unions that work on the port to include them in training as well. $44 million for university programs. This is very close to my heart. Homeland Security Centers of Excellence for minority-serving universities. We have had them on transportation security. We are working on trying to develop cybersecurity. These are where we help train the next frontline professionals for Homeland Security, Centers of Excellence. And they have been in a number of schools, and I would commend you to reviewing the success of those training opportunities for young people to go into the business of Homeland Security. I would argue for the expansion of such, because Homeland Security, in my perspective, is more important now than it has ever been, and you have one of, if not the most important committees, subcommittees on appropriations. It is the securing of this nation, the domestic security of this nation, which combines with intelligence and other aspects. So these particular centers of excellence are really to help build the workforce for the 21st century. $10 million for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and I'm going to just summarize and support robust funding for Customs, Border Protection, salaries, and expenses. I support $12 million for immigrant integration and citizenship programs. I spent a lot of time coming from Houston, going to swearing-in ceremonies, not being sworn at, but the very emotional services of new immigrants. And if you ever want joy, please participate in those. And we've had whole stadiums full of people in Houston, and they are so eager to be part of this great country. But they do ask the question for those of us who may be there speaking or may be there to acknowledge them, what do we do next? How do we participate in this great country? So I think the immigrant integration citizenship programs that CIS does is very important. Also helps them move forward and helps their family. $410 million for the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program. I think that's self-explanatory. But I want to finish my comments on CBP and the Citizenship and Immigration Services. We are in the midst of an executive order that many of us fully and completely disagree with, and that's, I know, recognized that we have different positions, and that's what Congress and what America is all about. But you will have to fund a number of these particular areas, and if we don't fund the processes of legal immigration to help people process, to help people seek legal immigration, to help people get status, then we're begging the question. I would argue I have nothing in here about the wall, and so I'll speak frankly. I've spent a lot of time on the border. I was here when the funding was allocated for the border that is the fence that is at San Diego. I've been here long enough to have been with all of the chairs of the Homeland Security Committee Authorizing Committee. I've been to that wall now. It is not, the fence, it is not a wall. The topography in Texas is not well suited for any kind of wall. All of the people rejected it, and I frankly don't think there's any resources, if it comes under your committee, maybe it's under another subcommittee, that there are any resources to build a wall. And with all of the monies that are being asked to bolster up Homeland Security to in fact provide for a secure nation, I believe that there are many other resources that can be utilized for our Border Patrol, enhancing staffing, more technology, possibly aerial resources that could be utilized. But working with the communities that are on the border, I believe those are important hearings that you should have on the border. With that, my big support for CBP, Border Patrol, and Immigration Services remains strong, and they should be funded to the needs that they have in doing their job. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your, Ranking Member, I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, and Chair will note that you have a very well submitted written statement, and thank you very much for your comments. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience.
No problem.
So I don't, my statement is already submitted. Yes, thank you. Well, let me.